Hello, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America, featuring today's top directors sharing behind-the-scenes stories of the latest films and insights into the craft of directing. The Director's Cut is now available on Spotify, so please take a second to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. This episode takes us behind the scenes of director Mimi Leder's new biographical drama, On the Basis of Sex. Inspired by the true story of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the film weaves together her career as an attorney fighting for equal rights, her storybook romance with her husband Martin Ginsburg, and her life as a new mother. In addition to On the Basis of Sex, Ms. Leder's credits include the feature films The Peacemaker, Deep Impact, and Pay It Forward, and episodes of the series China Beach, LA Law, Nashville, Luck, Shameless, and The Leftovers. She is a 3-time DGA Award nominee for her work on the television series ER. Following a recent screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Ms. Leder spoke with director Sacha Gervasi about filming On the Basis of Sex. During their conversation, Ms. Leder discusses balancing the classic and the contemporary, meeting the real-life Ruth Bader Ginsburg while developing the film, and the movie's coincidental connection with the documentary RBG.
Well, I'm sure I speak for all of us. I just watched the film with you guys right then. What an emotional film. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think what I particularly loved about it was it's a classic Hollywood film in one sense. But at the same time, super contemporary, and it feels so pertinent to what's going on now. And I was watching it actually with my wife, and we were just sort of nudging each other at so many points during the film, because as much as it's about a particular, clearly a very important case in the history of this, struggle regarding discrimination, it's also about a collaboration, a partnership, and a marriage. And that was one aspect that I think really surprised me. This tender, fragile, beautiful relationship played so perfectly by Felicity Jones and Armie Hammer. How cool was that for you in terms of how you approached the film?
Excuse me, I'm recovering from laryngitis, so my voice is odd. So I would say that, their relationship, Marty and Ruth's relationship, was really a metaphor for the film for equal partnership. And theirs was a marriage that lasted almost 58 years. And he really, truly was ahead of his time as a husband, as a man who he did the cooking, and she did the thinking. And he was, and I mean, he
did some thinking too, maybe.
No, he was one of the preeminent tax attorneys in the country. And when he died in 2010, they used to have these Supreme Court justices' wives' lunches. And so he was the sole man after Sandra Day O'Connor's husband, after she stepped down. And they would cook every week or every month, and they stopped cooking, the women stopped cooking, and he was the chef supreme, and they wrote a book about the Supreme Court justices' wives wrote a recipe book in his honor. And one of the quotes from Jane Ginsburg was, "Daddy does the cooking, Mommy does the thinking." And their marriage was unique, and I got a lot of insight to it from Justice Ginsburg.
It's so beautiful. And may I also say how impeccably made the film is. It's extraordinary, actually.
Thank you.
I just love the way the camera moves, and, all these things that we know you for. Your use of Steadicam is exemplary and extraordinary. Again, do you want to talk a little bit about how the film came about and how this story arrived on your lap?
Oh, sure. Well, Robert Court, our producer, and Jonathan King from Participant sent me the film, sent me the script, and I met with them, and I really wanted to do the film. Instantly, I responded to it immediately. And they offered it to me, and they said, you have to leave The Leftovers, because I was just in the beginning of starting my 3rd season in Australia. And I said, I can't leave the leftovers. I have to finish, because that was, a project that was very close to my heart. And so they said, you have to leave. And I said, I can't. So they moved on. And then about a month later, they called me in Australia and they said, well, okay, we're going to wait for you. So I was very lucky, I think, because I really wanted to tell this story, her story. And it was extremely challenging to do so because she's a living person and such a hero to so many of us. And I didn't do a lot of thinking about that because that would have probably paralyzed me. But, you said the film is very contemporary, and I'm glad you saw that because I really wanted the film to feel contemporary because so much has changed in our world and so little has changed. And I had an extraordinary group of people that I worked with, production designer, Nelson Coates and Michael Grady, our DP, E.C. Musenden, our costume designer, all great, beautiful collaborators, Vicki Thomas casting. So we really wanted to make it feel like it was a period film. We had two different periods, the 50s and the 70s, and we really wanted the color palette to be what you saw. Ruth's favorite color was blue, and I wanted to stay in that world with Ruth. And, in choosing how to shoot this film, it was very interesting, because I do shoot a lot of handheld and I shoot a lot of muscular stuff. And I really wanted it to have a classic feel, but I wanted it to feel contemporary. And it just, the script spoke to me. And
well, it's about something. And it's about something I know all of us can relate to, this tipping point that we're in right now, which is, we're past it. The patriarchal society shifting, people who have previously had no voice or less of a voice coming to the fore. We're listening and we're hearing. And I think this film is really part of that. It's fantastically alive. And it just really hit me in a way I wasn't quite expecting. The amount of times I nudged my wife during the film was really sorry about that, because it really does feel very real. And I think that everyone can relate. You really feel for, not just for Ruth, but you also feel for Marty. And as you say, he's an example of a much more evolved kind of person who doesn't really differentiate on the basis of sex in the way that society does. And those kind of villainous characters, which I know had to be drawn specifically for the film, but it's a very real thing that we do experience. And I think this film is really helping to shine a light on this thing that's still going on. Do you feel, or did you feel when you read the script that there was something important that it was saying that you, obviously, as a woman in film with your incredible career, could relate, I'm sure, to quite a few of these? Yeah,
well, everything you said, yes. And I related to the film. I felt a lot of commonalities with Justice Ginsburg, and certainly not in my accomplishments, but, in just being someone who's a Jewish woman, who's been in a long-standing marriage for 32 years, and having had a lot of doors slammed in my face and breaking the glass ceiling in my way, and saw change because of it, because I've been doing this for quite a long time. And I just felt a lot of commonalities, and I really understood her. And then it was so intimidating when I met her, because
how was that?
This little thing, this little woman.
What did you have questions? What was it like? What was it?
We went out on our first date, and it was really fun. And we had some wine and had a really nice meal. And it was really hard because you have all these questions you want to ask, like, how did you know Marty was the one? And you're asking someone Supreme Court Justice, this icon, these very personal questions. And she said something like, and she's very intimidating, she really thinks about what she says before she says it. And so it puts you in this position of, oh, if that's too personal, you don't have to answer that question. But no, she answered the question. She said, as I dated Marty, they dated for 2 years before they married, and she was dating this other guy. And she said he was a real idiot and that he wasn't smart.
The guy who wasn't good at charades.
That's right. And so, but how could I not marry Marty? He was brilliant. He was the one. And so out of that dinner came the charade scene, which wasn't in the movie. And so little things like that crept into the film from speaking with her.
And you felt it was also such a wonderful mother-daughter dynamic, I thought. Those scenes were really landed well. I know you have a daughter too.
I certainly do.
Because I felt a lot of you in the film. I mean, this felt like a very personal film.
Yes, it was very personal, and I felt it was really important to shape Jane's character as someone that she sees as someone who's changing the culture, as, you know, the professor in the early part of the film says, you know, it's the culture that is changing, and that became her whole, her whole through line for the case, that the culture had changed and the laws were outdated, and there her daughter. It was very important for us to see Jane as this character of change and evolution.
And all of the characters, including Jane and those Supreme Court justices, how exquisitely cast were they? I mean, I felt they were actually. I felt they weren't actors, which is always the biggest compliment.
Oh, the judges.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they were great. One is my husband.
Really?
Yeah.
Where is he?
Yeah.
Is he here?
He's home.
Okay. Oh, he's after that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But wow, they were just fantastic.
Yeah.
I was going to say, in terms of the process when you put the film together, obviously we sense as an audience the layers that went into this. You know, not just the casting, but also you mentioned the look, and I mean, it's so exquisitely done. How much prep time did you have, and was it something that was ongoing for a long time until?
Yeah. Well, I worked on the script with Daniel and Robert for almost a year. You know, just getting the characters more authentic, more grounded. You know, the one aspect of the script that Justice Ginsburg was really a stickler on was the law. The law had to be correct, had to be precise. And, excuse me, I lost my train of thought.
Well, don't worry. I was going to say just something generally about you and your unbelievable career. For those in the audience who don't know, Mimi is a pioneer. You really, in terms of being a producer and a director and a woman with an unbelievably long career. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Because you did pioneering work on many things like ER, and also some of the stuff you mentioned on The Leftovers is incredible, those episodes that you directed. So you've gone between television and features. Yeah. I know that Steven Spielberg was a big part of, you know, the beginning of your features career.
Yes.
And have there been, you know, helping hands like that along the way that have really...
Well, it's so interesting. You know, he did hire me to direct the first DreamWorks feature, and it's mostly been men who have led me along, who've given me great work. Sherry Lansing is the only woman who's ever hired me in my career. It's true.
Well, she's great. We know that.
But I think I wanted to say that you asked about the prep. We prepped the film for about 8 weeks. We shot it in Montreal and 1 day in D.C., and we shot it in 34 days.
Wow.
So it was shot very quickly, a high budget for an indie, you know, but all hands on deck. It was everybody who worked on that film wanted to work on that film.
Well, you can tell.
Everyone was very passionate, and we tried to be. We never wanted to do a documentary, or, you know, never wanted to do an imitation, but just wanted to find the essence of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and who she was as this truth seeker, who she was as this person who changed the culture and changed the world, and, you know, with this landmark case, changed 178 different laws that were unconstitutional on the basis of sex.
It's
She's a remarkable woman.
Well, when you see in the film, you see her balancing all these incredibly difficult things. One thing alone, being a parent, you know, being a wife, but the legal career is astonishing. Yes. And you just think, my God, women really do have a much greater capacity to do stuff in life. I mean, that's what I got from the film. I wanted to just also talk something technically about the film, because I know a lot of the time you will shoot with 3 cameras. Yes. But I think I read somewhere that in this case you wanted mainly to use 2 because of the way the film was lit. And I wanted to talk a little bit about why that was, how this was different and why it was different.
Well, I did shoot a lot with 3 cameras. But I told Michael Grady, our DP, that I wanted Felicity to look remarkable and beautiful, and really, you know, show her at 23, show her at 36. And we wanted her to be lit a certain way. And so, I want to put my 3 cameras. No, you can't use your 3 cameras because you'd ruin the look of the lighting. So I did use a lot of 2 cameras.
And talking about Felicity and that relationship and working with your actors, can you talk a little bit with us about what that process is like? I've read that you don't necessarily like to rehearse because you might lose some spontaneity. How do you work with the actors? Do you have thematic conversations, or
Yes.
How does it work?
Yeah, we sit down and I write their whole, bio of who they are, and I work very closely with the writer and very much, build my characters before I talk to anybody. And then we sit down and thematically talk about the characters. I do sit down with the actors and read through the scenes, and we talk about it. And we talk about the intent and, what each character wants and how they're going to get it. But I don't like to set anything in rehearsal because then it becomes something we're aiming for that maybe we can't find again. And I like when we hit the floor for the actors to feel completely open. And I want them to explore as much as they can, the scene.
Well, you got brilliant performances across the board. What would you say for all the young aspiring directors and filmmakers out there, and there are some in the audience today, what to you is the key working with actors to try and create an atmosphere in which you're getting the best performance?
Yeah, well, I would study acting, number one, and, really understand what an actor goes through. But there's many different kinds of actors. There are actors who are, 3 takes and done. They that's all they have, or that's all they're going to give you, or that's all there is. And then there's actors who want, to keep exploring. And you really have to weigh that out when you're directing them, how not to wear out the other actor, how to get the best out of both of them. And so I would actually look to the theater, to, theater acting. And, Harold Clurman was a very great book. I think he wrote on acting. And I think that's a very great book for young directors. And
well, it was amazing. And what's interesting, because I know that a lot of the actors in your film, they don't necessarily have the same method of acting. And the real trick is to get all the actors to feel like they're in the same movie. Yeah. And in this case, they're in the same movie. So there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work for you to try and calibrate and equalize that.
Well, yeah. I mean, Felicity did, listen to hundreds and hundreds of hours of recordings. And, like I said, we weren't doing a documentary and or an imitation. And, there are no early recordings of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's voice, only, from her Supreme Court days, her 6 Supreme Court cases she tried, and the obviously her swearing in 1993. So, how does a 23-year-old woman sound? How does a 36-year-old woman sound compared to, when she was sworn in? And how does an 85-year-old woman's voice sound? So, we went for a mid-Atlantic, and the justice loved her accent. That she loved her performance. After I showed her the film, she said she thought it was magnificent, and she thought that no one could play her as better than Felicity Jones, and that was quite a statement and an honor, because she's a British actress.
Right. And I was going to ask you, what was that like for you, showing the Supreme Justice the film?
Well, I showed her the film in D.C. in this really funky little theater. It was a landmark theater, but it was oddly shaped. And so I was terrified, out of my mind, freaked out that I had to show it to her. And
were you watching her as this was
Oh,
going?
yeah. And so I positioned her seat, gave her a name card, and her family. She brought her entire family, all her interns, all her law clerks. And I was like, I almost left. But, and then I positioned myself so I could watch everything all her reactions. And I could see her laugh, I could see her cry, I could see just her movements. And then she gave me a big kiss, and she was overwhelmed. She loved it. I mean, one of the things she said was that it was a joyous film. and that we got her work in the women's movement, in the women's rights movement, right. She's very proud of it. And that's all I think anyone needs.
I can't imagine anything more satisfying than that.
Yeah.
Than your subject feeling the film in the way that you intended it.
Yeah. And I had to not really think about that I was making a film about a living icon that, is so known. I mean, I don't know, I think when the doc, obviously people know who she is, but not until, the RBG, Notorious RBG came out did we really start to see her as this cult figure. And then when the doc came out, which is incredible, people really began to understand who she was. But going into the movie, the doc wasn't finished, and they had asked us to be in the doc. But it just all didn't work out. But point is,
it's good to have the separation.
It was good to have that separation, and I had not seen it. And what was really interesting was our great editor, Michelle Tesoro. The scene at the end where she walks up the steps, that wasn't in the script. The script was, she had won the case and in the appeals court in 10th Circuit. And then she's sitting in the Supreme Court listening to her words being spoken by Alan Deere. And Marty turns to her and says something like, "Those are your words." And I was like, this is the biggest downer. This is the worst ending ever. And so my DP and I were standing in front of the Supreme Court steps. And we were standing there also to decide what format we're going to do the film in. And we decided to do it in 185 because the Supreme Court is so high. And doing it in a 235 format it would just not have worked for, I think, the film. So anyway, I was standing there and I had, the opening was a very, big deal for me, showing her in the sea of men. And I wanted to bookend the film with, the young Ruth and where Ruth has gone to, how she has ascended to the Supreme Court. And I wanted our young Felicity our young Ruth to morph into RBG. So I pitched it to our producers, and some of them were a little skeptical. I said, I swear to God, it's going to work. It's going to be great. And so I wrote a letter to the justice, and she said yes. And I was like, oh my God, now it's happening.
Well, it's such an effective moment. Not only is it just very poetic visually, but it's also when you see the real person. Of course, whenever that happens, it really lands the reality and the truth of the story that's been told.
Yes, thank you. And what I was going to say is my editor, put it together, and she put the words of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Supreme Court, her 6 cases, sayings, from those cases under the walk. And when I saw, obviously I'd locked the picture before I'd seen the documentary. Then I saw the documentary, and it was exactly how the documentary had started. Get their feet off our necks. And I just thought it was, oh God, I just thought it was meant to be.
Well, it does have the film.
Like a sister film.
The film has that feeling about it. It's meant to be. And I just want to say it's a beautiful, brave, and emotional film, Mimi. And all around me, people were just very feeling it, and they were laughing. And and to do that about a subject matter as important as this at a time like this is really something. And I think I speak on behalf of all of us when I say thank you for making the film. Wow. It's a wonderful,
thank
wonderful,
you so much.
Wonderful film.
Thank you. Wow. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. If you'd like to hear more, you can find past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll have a lot more for you in the coming weeks as award season continues, including Q&As from directors Peter Hedges, Adam McKay, and Anne Fletcher, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you're enjoying our podcast, please take a moment to rate and review us on iTunes. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow cinephiles find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally,